What are you doing, man? Playing PlayStation back there? What the hell
It
is that?
sounds like it, right? No, it's my beep beep uns uns music.
There you go. KLF! Yo, that was my shit in 91, son.
Yeah, like I loved how I don't know that band was just like so obviously taking the piss, right?
Yeah.
Like they were serious on the one hand, like we want to make cool dance music here, but on the other hand, like if you watch the videos and stuff, you can tell that like they're smirking through the whole way.
Yo, it was 91. I was born in 78, so what? I was 13.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I didn't know anything about anything in
Right.
91.
So you probably just took it on face value, right?
Yeah, yeah. We just thought it was dope because of,
Right.
how house music all night long. Say what? House music all night long. And it was that time. Well then, sir, let's get into the lightning round.
All right.
All right, man. So, first story. True or false? Stevie Wonder is blind.
Stevie Wonder is blind. Is that the?
That
Is
is the
it?
question. True or
Okay.
false question, my friend. Stevie Wonder is blind.
I'm gonna say false.
This is a hilarious development, man, that over the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years,
Uh,
it's been coming up. And there is an entire segment of the internet that call themselves Stevie Wonder truthers.
that's
And they
fun.
say it is. And they say that Stevie Wonder is not blind. Now, when Stevie was a kid, uh, he was born, I think, prematurely, and he was in an oxygen-rich environment, and this messed up his eyes.
Okay.
His eyes didn't develop properly, so he's been blind since he was a really, really small baby. But one of the guys I listen to all the time, Bomani Jones, he's the one that put me onto the fact that Stevie Wonder is not blind, according to him, because he used to always tell the story about how one of his friends worked in an electronics store or a big shop, and they sold Stevie Wonder four plasma screen TVs. And Shaquille O'Neal, he said that he lived in the same building with Stevie Wonder. This is from uprocks.com. And Stevie Wonder ran into Shaq. The big man was in the building, at which point he ran into Stevie by God Wonder, who asked, "What's up, Shaq?" before getting in the elevator, pressing a button, and going wherever he needed to go. Lionel Richie has a story where Stevie Wonder jumps in his car and, like when you're about to go in reverse in your car, turns
Uh,
around, puts his arm around the seat as if he's about to start going in reverse, and Lionel Richie jumps up, "Stevie, what the hell are you doing?" So yeah, man.
that's crazy. Now I thought that there was gonna be some like technicality where like he's partially blind or whatever. I didn't I didn't realize you were gonna go in this direction.
I'm telling you, man, there are a lot of people who think that Stevie Wonder is not blind.
Not actually.
Uh, from the now RIP Deadspin, that was always one of my favorite websites. He was born 6 weeks premature, which, along with the oxygen-rich atmosphere in the hospital incubator, resulted in retinopathy of prematurity, a condition which the growth of eyes is aborted, causes the retinas to detach. Right? Boy George said that Stevie Wonder ran up on him in a party and quote unquote strangled him a little bit, but in a joking way. How the hell did he see Boy George? How did he know where to put his hands?
Well, a lot of this is to me doesn't actually sound as mysterious as I mean, because like if you're blind, you develop all these other senses, right?
Uh-huh.
Your sense of smell and everything else. You develop them more keenly, and like as far as an elevator, like he could have remembered like which button to press, right? I mean, like a lot of these like stories or anecdotes that you're telling me, like they're not fully like as spooky as they might seem or whatever.
So you're saying that Stevie Wonder is basically Daredevil from Detroit. That's what you're saying.
No, I have no idea, but
He's got all the senses.
I'm saying that your conspiracy sounds a little half-baked.
Okay, in 2010, Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney performed in the White House East Room. Clumsily, Paul McCartney knocked over a microphone. Stevie Wonder reaches out and grabs it. What's that? What's that? He's got spider sense now, you telling me, Matthew Phillips?
Look, basically, yes. Like, if I... like, have you ever, like, hurt your arm or your leg or whatever, and let's say it hurts for a week or two, or like a relatively long time, all of a sudden you start developing the other parts of your body really well. Like you notice, wow, these other parts of my body, if I pay a little bit more attention, I can make them do things that I didn't really sort of realize that they could do before. And like the fact that if somebody, I mean, just assuming for the moment that he's sincerely blind, you develop all these other senses, and it would seem to other people as if you had spidey sense or whatever.
And the final story, Stevie Wonder goes to a lot of NBA games, okay? And he doesn't just sit anywhere randomly. He sits in the front row. So what's the deal with that, man?
He's going there to socialize.
Yo, I think it's one of the most hilarious conspiracy theories in the history of mankind. I love it, man. And
one of the fathers of conspiracy theory, Robert Anton Wilson, wrote a really good book that I posted about just a couple hours ago called The Illuminatus Trilogy.
Yes.
And it's about 800 pages, and it's like a real big mindfuck of a book. And apparently they're making a TV show into it.
No way. Get out of here.
Yeah. Have you read Illuminatus?
I have not.
Okay.
The phrase itself terrifies me.
Right.
And when I saw that post, it immediately made me think of the covers of Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Right.
Garish and incredibly detailed paintings.
Yeah. I would, if you're in the mood for some really far out science fiction, I can recommend.
Okay, that's what's up, man. I will get on a plane, go to a warm country, take some drugs, and read this book.
A lot of it does read like a comic book, like, because it's so just like somebody's like saying to themselves, how can we make this plot as crazy as possible? But they do it in a really good way, and so you like, you go along for the ride, and you're like, okay, this is, I mean, I can't really believe this, but okay,
Yo, that sounds dope, man. I got a bunch of books and EPUBs and Mobi files I have on my hard drive, so I'll add that to the collection. Thanks, man.
Good.
All right, man. Next story. This one from Yahoo Lifestyle. A Kansas woman angered several of her neighbors after revealing a large, sexually explicit holiday display on her rooftop. Shelby Gash, ironically her name is, age 24, shared photos of her decorated home on Facebook earlier this month, showing what would go on to become a source of local outrage. The house's roof was patterned with a long string of lights in the shape of a male reproductive organ. Sorry, neighbors. I felt the need to make a giant dick on the roof, Gash wrote on Facebook. 'Tis the season. I mean, why not,
Wait, so this is a woman, right?
Yes.
And she made some lights that formed a penis.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry, because it's Yahoo, a male reproductive organ. Because, we can't say the word penis.
Is it on a door or what?
It is on her rooftop. Just a giant cock.
That's funny.
I love the fact that Yahoo cannot use the word penis, first of all. It has to be a male reproductive organ. Secondly, Her name is Gash. Oh man, I mean, that's one of the words there for vagina that you don't hear often. Um,
That's one of the better words in the English language. Gash.
I, you know what? It's too graphic, man. You know, and the British have the one. What do they say? Axe wound. I mean, it's yeah. It's violent, man. I'm not about that.
Curtains.
Oh, just see, see now we've gone into a terrifying place. I mean, it's got you ready to read articles on Jezebel about the male gaze and stuff like that. When you use terrifying words.
Shush! Stop! Oh, please. One of my
I
favorite, one of my favorite posts on Facebook forever was this post from a friend, and I think she made it with a friend. It was like something like about a hundred or so words for male genitalia and then female genitalia, and they were all like, or like 80 or 90% of it was just like howling out loud funny. I'll try to find it. It's, oh my god, funny.
I appreciate that, man. I think everybody's inner 12-year-old wants to just read dirty words for sexual
Totally,
organs and
totally.
just laugh.
Yeah.
So this woman, of course, the biggest argument against her display,
Uh-huh.
think of the children.
Right.
Well, it's certainly a statement, one neighbor, Marcelo Vergara, told WDAF-TV, a local station out there in Kansas. I don't know to what, but it's probably not appropriate for the neighborhood. Yeah, and I don't think it's appropriate for little kids, Marcelo's wife, Christy Vergara, added, because, little kids should not see giant phallic representations of where they came from.
Well, wait. If it's on the roof, how are they gonna see it?
That's another thing. Are you climbing up on the roof? To me, it seems, if anything, it's more of a sign to Santa. Land here. You know what it's about. You
Hmm.
know, it's creepy and it's weird. And then the last Christmas related story,
Hmm.
uh, for the lightning round. Another one from Yahoo Lifestyle because I love Yahoo and I've been down with Yahoo since '97. It's my first email account.
Hmm.
Uh, Somebody made a Christmas sweater that has Santa Claus doing
I saw
three
this.
of coke.
Wait, say it again.
I okay. Walmart Canada pulls Let It Snow Christmas sweater featuring a cocaine using Santa Claus. This one from Yahoo Lifestyle. A festive sweater sold on Walmart Canada's website is bringing new meaning to the phrase "Let it snow," and now the retailer is apologizing. The controversial sweater sold on Walmart.ca depicted a bug-eyed Santa celebrating next to what appeared to be lines of cocaine with "Let it snow," a reference to the street drug's name, to the, written below. And then the product description is the best.
Lines through my mind.
Ba-doom, 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 bass. The product description is the best. We all know how snow works. It's white, powdery, and the best snow comes straight from South America. That's bad news for jolly old Saint Nick, who lives far away in the North Pole. That's why Santa really needs to savor the moment when he gets his hands on some quality grade A Colombian snow. He packs it in perfect lines on his coffee table and then takes a big whiff to smell the high quality aroma of the snow. It's exactly what he needs to get inspired for Christmas Eve. I mean,
It
the
sounds,
pic
it sounds like an advertisement for Narcos.
it really does, right? Everything comes back to Narcos somehow, man. You know what I'm saying? Don- ¿Dónde está mi puta cocaína, maricón?
Yeah, like it seems like I don't know, something like 10 or 20% of the many articles I read each week are now like I can make a connection to Narcos.
Everything connects to Narcos, you know what I'm saying? And it's only because everyone in the world is doing drugs, man. How do you think the dude made $50 billion? You know? I mean, take a look at this picture, man. I'm sending it to you now. It is an insane picture of Santa Claus. His eyes are super wide open. You know, he's got.
That's a scary Santa. That looks more like meth Santa.
He's got the Mr. Bill hands, yay! And the Coke is set up in a Christmas tree made up of 8 balls.
He looks like a snowman Santa, not a regular Santa.
That's another thing, yeah. But his eyes are absolutely, you know, I've just done a couple of 8 balls. Let's get some more in there.
Like, he's a big snowman, but then he's got like a red robe on, and a red hat on.
Santa's ready to party.
Oh my
Santa
God.
is ready to party.
That's actually like an awesome sweater, and I would totally buy it if it were available.
I'm not going to disagree with you, man. I think that this is a dope sweater. Quite literally a dope sweater.
They should just sell it in like the age appropriate section or whatever, you know? I mean, it's pretty simple. Pretty simple.
Yeah, you know, so many things, you know, people, I mean, if the media is able to censor, if the media is able to keep Bernie Sanders out of mainstream media, why can't you hide this sweater?
Look, censoring is for the corporate media, not we don't want to censor what the corporations do or what they sell.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not into Christmas sweaters, but I would buy 3 of these.
What are you drinking there?
Well, what we got right here is Cafe Bustelo. My mom sent me a box from New York.
You said it the same way this time as you did last time.
Yo, man, and Cafe Bustelo is the primo cafe. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Narcos. In other news, from archpaper.com, the EPA is now allowing asbestos back into manufacturing. Because why not? Why not? Fast Company recently reported on the potential comeback of one of the most infamous building materials in recent memory. Asbestos is now legally allowed back into U.S. manufacturing under a series of loopholes by the EPA. Because, you know, why not? Let's get some asbestos back in your breakfast cereal.
In my lungs.
Yeah. As Fast Company reported on June 1st, the EPA authorized an SNUR, significant new use rule, that allowed the distribution of products containing asbestos on a case-by-case basis. According to Fast Company, the EPA's recently released report detailing its new framework for evaluating the risk of its top prioritized substances states that the agency will, quote, no longer consider the effect or presence of substances in the air, ground, or water in its risk assessments, unquote. Son.
You know, I'm going to take a stab in the dark and guess that this has less to do with asbestos than it does regulations in toto. Like,
You gotta get rid of them, yeah. Gotta get rid of regulations.
the Republicans, you know, like when you imagine you're like sort of garden variety entrepreneur Republican dildo, you know, like one of the first things, if you talk to these kinds of dildos, one of the first things that they'll fucking whine in your ear about are like, you know, like building codes and regulations.
That's right. That's right, man. Well, you know, regulations are hurting small business owners, Matthew Phillips. And how can the economy continue to expand in perpetuity ad nauseum unless we get rid of all these goddamn regulations, man? I mean, why is it that there's a regulation not allowing coal mine waste to just be dumped into the rivers in Virginia? You know, I mean, who cares? God damn it. I need my coal. Oh my God. This is insane, dude. Yeah. The news comes after the EPA reviewed its first batch of 10 chemicals under the 2016 amendment to the 1976 Toxic Substances Control Act, which requires the agency to continually reevaluate hundreds of potential toxic chemicals in lieu of removing them from the market or placing new restrictions on their use. The SNUR green lights companies to use toxic chemicals like asbestos without consideration about how they will endanger people who are indirectly in contact with them.
See, I'm sort of right. Didn't it say like asbestos?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's not only
the asbestos is the like headline grabbing attention thing, or the attention grabbing headline.
Right.
The legislation itself is probably a lot less focused on asbestos than it is just general regulations of this sort.
That's right. That's right. And the problem is, once you can just say, hey man, asbestos is not that bad.
Right, then you're willing to like forgive anything, right?
I mean, do you remember the videos of the kids in the 1950s, was it, chasing behind the trucks, spraying, what was it, DDT? Yay, DDT is not bad for you at all. I mean, those black and white videos are just kids in a swimming pool laughing as this shit just coats the fucking water and then just dying of horrific blood diseases and not knowing why. One thing about living in New York is that anytime you had a day off for school, you would watch just, the fucking avalanche of Judge Judy, Maury Povich, Sally Jesse Raphael. And the commercials that they would show were always some, ambulance chasing lawyer.
Right.
Have you slip and fall? Did you ever slip and fall? Or do you want to sue the building? And one of the biggest commercials was always, is someone in your family dying from mesothelioma because they worked in a building that was chock full of asbestos? Call 1-800-SUE motherfuckers, So now I'm seeing this asbestos thing. Yeah, let's bring back asbestos because why not? What's lung cancer? It's no big deal. The air's already shit.
And of course, if you're a capitalist, you're making your money by flipping these houses, not by living in the houses. So you don't give a fuck if they have asbestos in them.
That is the way it's working these days, man. That is definitely the way it's working these days. This one was from November 12th, that climate change is breaking open America's nuclear tomb on the Marshall Islands. Basically, the Marshall Islands was nuked 67 times by the United States with tests.
Right.
After it finished nuking the islands, the Pentagon dropped bioweapons on the islands, every fucking horrible thing that they could have possibly wanted to use on the Soviets.
60s.
Yeah. Once they were finished nuking and coating the island in biological and chemical weapons, they took all of the ruined soil from the islands, poured it in a crater left behind from a nuclear detonation, mixed it with concrete, and covered the thing in a concrete dome. They call it the tomb. Right. According to a report from the LA Times, climate change is breaking that dome open because of rising sea levels and temperatures. And then this is a huge threat to spill nuclear waste into the Pacific Ocean, okay?
Right.
So to tie that into what's happening now, there was a story that I read on the Flipboard. That's one of my favorite aggregators. Mm-hmm. That now in the Marshall Islands, as of about a week or two ago, huge waves and disease are turning the Marshall Islands into a war zone. The level of alarm is already high in the Republic of the Marshall Islands as the Pacific Island nation struggles with the rising sea levels, the after effects of the U.S. testing as well. So what's going on there? They're getting hit with massive flu, measles. A couple of weeks ago, swells averaging more than 15 feet spilled over the low-lying coral atoll, and the highest natural point is 6 feet above sea level. I mean, these people are just being murdered by everything. What's going on with that, man?
Do you know, roughly speaking, how many people live there?
50,000 people.
That's what I would guess. Like, it's not even like a small city or it's barely like a tiny little American city.
Right.
So it's not nobody on the one hand, but it's not millions of people on the other hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this will never rate as anything that most people would ever consider like newsworthy.
Exactly. And that is horrible because it's not just that their home is being crushed by the waves and the increasing levels of the sea. That's bad enough.
Right.
But they've also been poisoned.
Yeah, well, and also I guess if this tomb cracks open, right, you don't want that fucking slime all into the ocean, do you? Right?
I mean, last week we talked about how, the sea life is just eating already tons of plastic, dead whales with 100 pounds of plastic in their stomach. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of people who have been working in the oceans for decades saying, yeah, we don't see as much shit swimming around as we used to.
Sonia Guayahara, I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name.
Mm-hmm.
She's in Brazil, and she says, we're asking for help because Bolsonaro is not just a problem for Brazil. He's a problem for the entire planet. The Amazon is being burnt, and her defenders are being cruelly assassinated. The forest is at risk much more than before. Latin America is being raped again by the most predatory greed that rapes nature and attacks human rights. They want to recolonize us and impose a singular way of life. Each one of us is a warrior in the fight that was inflicted onto us against life, a fight that's been happening for over 500 years. We don't have a plan B. We don't have a planet B. And each one of us is fundamental in this fight.
The Amazon deforestation, apparently it was twice as much as has ever occurred in the period from January to November. 83% more than in the same period in 2018 in an area almost the size of Puerto Rico, according to an article in The Guardian. What can the people in Brazil do when the army just walks into the jungle and is just shooting people?
Right.
Also kind of like in Narcos, where they had that fake, yeah, so these bullets don't match. This is bullshit. What are you talking about? Yeah, everything does relate to Narcos. But what can these people do, Matt? What do you think? Because I know that you're into, protests and flipping the government, but how can these people do something that's going to get not just their countrymen, but the world to wake up? We need the fucking Amazon.
Well, for a long time, for decades, really, they've been extremely, brave fighters who have held the line in many successful battles. But the recent, government tilting towards the right wing, they got in unfairly. They should have never gotten in, right? But they jailed Lula, so he couldn't run. Lula really should be president, but I think the best thing that we can say about how we approach this is we just need to spread the word. And when people, if I could magically send a dream to everybody and everybody woke up the next morning knowing what was going on, in the Amazon rainforest, things would happen. Things would happen.
Okay. So
I think spreading knowledge is really the best thing we can do.
All right. So the headline for this story is Matthew Phillips thinks the plot to Inception is the key to saving the Amazon rainforest. Got it. I'm a dick. I'm sorry. No, that's beautiful, man. I feel you. What's your next environmental thing, buddy?
There was an interview with one of the authors of this recent book, and the guy's name is Raj Patel, and he says the Anthropocene is a term that suggests that there's a geological era that is characterized by human activity, but it's more accurate to say that the scale of this particular geological era, characterized by the things that humans have laid into the fossil record, things like plastic, things like residues from atmospheric nuclear weapons tests, things like chicken bone, none of those things have been caused by humans in the normal operation of going about our daily business. On the contrary, it's a particular kind of human society that has caused all these things, and that's capitalism. So he's on a hobby horse, which I particularly like. Calling the name the Anthropocene sort of seems to infer that the problem with the planet are humans, but it's really not. The problem with the planet is capitalism.
Because the entire way that we grew up learning about capitalism is there always has to be growth.
Well, right. And also, people sort of think that capitalism is this natural outgrowth of pre-existing economic forms, and
Right.
it is to a certain natural, or it is to a certain extent natural, but it's not inevitable, and it's not necessarily progress. Um,
Well, I think it was you that wrote that there was a good line that you wrote somewhere, I think. And you said that commerce is not capitalism. I think it
right,
was something like that. That,
right,
you know, people will always naturally exchange goods and services for something. I
right,
agree with that idea, but not on this scale.
right. And
They're Go
exchange
ahead.
exchange and commerce are not inherently good things. We used to sell slaves. That doesn't mean it was a good thing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And it's okay, you know, if we do trade together. It's okay if nations do trade together. But because the goal of capitalism is just absolutely 100% corporations are people
Mm,
and keep them alive at all costs, no matter what harm it does to people, the environment, or towns. That is cancer, man.
mm.
Something cannot continue to grow indefinitely. I mean, that's the definition of what cancer does to the body. These cells will keep growing until the body dies.
Yeah,
And
that's one of the distinguishing characteristics of capitalism is this sort of um, imperative to grow. Like, in the Middle Ages or in the feudal era, you had people making things that were roughly commodity-like, but when you had these guilds and these production teams making things, they weren't thinking to themselves, well, as soon as we sell these 200, we're going to make this much money, and then we're going to turn that over and then become a bigger company. It wasn't. That's the thing. And
that's
then
right.
and then the same thing with, like, the other thing that marks capitalism as a unique system unto itself, different from something like feudalism, is like, if you look at a normal worker, 500 years ago, they weren't compelled usually to work for you.
Right.
If they wanted, they could just go out with their friends and decide, we're going to live on the land from now on. We don't like the deal you're giving us. We're going to, pick our apples, and we're going to be fine in the countryside. Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
But, like, nowadays, like, that's not really. I mean, all the free land has been taken up by the state and by corporations, so you can't just go forage on the land for yourself. That's
There is
not.
no, yeah, off the grid is a fantasy.
Yeah, that's not an option anymore.
Off the grid is definitely a fantasy, man. Yeah. Yeah, infinite growth is the problem with capitalism.
Mm.
Keeping businesses alive no matter what, and then subsidizing the ones that are killing us all. The agribusiness subsidies that are handed out, the subsidies to the oil industry and gas industry that are handed out. And now you have this industry with all of these animals. There are far more cows than have ever existed on the earth, far more
Mm.
pigs, far more chickens. And every time there's a massive flood in the area of the Panhandle or Louisiana, all of that pig shit, cow shit, chicken shit ends up in the water. It poisons the Gulf. The fish die, the shrimp die. Now the people who are out there fishing, their businesses are affected. There are still effects from the oil spill in the Gulf that people are seeing in terms of their health and how it's affected the wildlife. But hey, capitalism, we got to keep going. We cannot say, you know what, maybe we should not look for oil in this place where people fucking take food out of the water. Maybe it's not a good idea to keep throwing shit in the water right where people go fishing for food. You can't do that.
Here's
And-
another.
Yeah.
Here's another headline on the general topic. Sanders vows, if elected, to pursue criminal charges against fossil fuel CEOs for knowingly destroying the planet. They knew that it was real. Their own scientists told them that it was real. What do you do to people who lied in a very bold-faced way, lied to the American people, lied to the media?
Wow. So
that's one of these variables which, forget about Sanders for the moment. Like, let's say you Norbert have $500 million, and part of your $500 million you have invested in, let's say, 5 different oil stocks or whatever.
Okay.
And now, after 20, 30 years of you investing in this stock, you've got people coming up to you saying, well, we told you this was a great deal 20 years ago, and we told you that it was never going to end. But you know what? Actually, it's coming to an end in 10 years or 5 years or whatever, So you're going to be pissed off because you have been sold a bill of goods as well. There's going to be all sorts of litigation on this kind of thing.
Well, how do you take, so what is it, BP, for example, British Petroleum?
Yeah.
Right? Those guys are they were the first, weren't they? The first big oil company. It came out of the Standard Oil Company. Am I tripping out?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know they're one of the big players.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for example, say like BP, they were responsible for the Deepwater Horizon.
Yeah.
Before Apple and Amazon, I think the oil industry was the most successful industry in the history of man.
Okay.
So the suit that they had to pay, they ended up paying what, $1 billion?
Okay, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's a fart in the wind to them.
Yeah, basically.
So a lawsuit against the fossil fuel industry, that's not something that I necessarily agree with, because they will always they're fucking Scrooge McDuck, man. They swim around in piles and piles of money. Now, I don't know about a lawsuit. How about criminal proceedings?
Yeah.
Lock some of these motherfuckers up. And then how about taxing the shit out of them so that they have to reinvest their money instead of just sitting on piles and piles of money? Because most of those, those organizations that are called like Americans for Truth and Climate Information for People, those fake ass public interest things. You see commercials, Americans for Justice.
Right.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
So many of those things are funded by like the Heritage Foundation,
right?
And people who work for fossil fuel industries, so they obfuscate solutions that we should have enacted decades ago. People believe nonsense. That's what I think needs to happen to those companies. They need to be forced to, okay, take your fucking oil profits, build a solar farm for real, build a wind farm for real.
Well, when I mentioned litigation, I didn't necessarily mean purely civil.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Zismore. It shows the horrible irresponsibility of these people, because they did have those documents and they were being warned. And instead of taking that money and creating the backup system so that, now we can just transition, because they could still, in theory, have all the money from a giant solar farms that were built by BP.
Sure, totally. Like if you would have started the transition in earnest 30 years ago when we all knew this was a thing, sure, why not?
Exactly. And this ties back to what you were saying, man, about just the rapaciousness of capitalism, just constantly growing. We have to keep doing oil because that's what we do. Instead of thinking generations ahead, okay, the climate is changing. We know that this shit is happening. Why have we not built fusion batteries yet? We know that we have no way to dispose of nuclear waste. Why are we funding this shit?
Now, the general tenor of comments thus far suggests that you should tell us maybe the blood story now.
Yes, that is absolutely an excellent professional transition, my friend. Late stage capitalism, my friend. This one is from mintpressnews.com, what Matthew Phillips would call one of those dodgy websites.
No, not me, not me. I wouldn't say that. Mint Press is pretty good.
I'm just playing with you, man.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the title of this article, Harvesting the Blood of America's Poor, the latest stage of capitalism. You may have seen over the last few months, people posting a meme where you see it's a bus stop ad, and there's just a cheerful student, and the ad is trying to induce people, hey, you don't have money for books? Give blood.
Oh God.
And it's one of those things where post Onion and post Truth, quite frankly, the world we live in, you see that, come on, that can't be real. And it is. It's absolutely real. So the article says, for much of the world, donating blood is purely an act of solidarity, a civic duty that the healthy perform to aid others in need. But in the United States, it's a big business. Indeed, in today's wretched economy, where around 130 million Americans admit an inability to pay for basic needs like food, housing, or healthcare, buying and selling blood is one of the booming industries America has left. Matthew Phillips, have you ever donated blood?
Maybe once or twice.
Yeah. Did you ever get paid for donating blood?
No, I don't think so. It was just like part of a blood donor drive.
Right. Just like me. It has never once occurred to me that
To sell your blood.
Yeah. I have never said, you know what, man, I wish I had money to buy this PlayStation 4. I got it. I'm going to donate blood. So that the people who are doing this are just fucking desperate, man.
Yeah.
The number of collection centers in the United States has more than doubled since 2005. Blood now makes up well over 2% of total U.S. exports by value. To put that in perspective, Americans' blood is now worth more than all exported corn or soy products that cover vast areas of the country's heartland. Corn or soy is worth less than blood. U.S. supplies fully 70% of the world's plasma, mainly because other countries have banned the practice on ethical and medical grounds. Because of course! What the fuck, man? Exports increased by over 13% to 28.6 billion between 2016 and 2017. And the plasma market is expected to, quote, grow radiantly because capitalism. According to one industry report, the majority goes to wealthy European countries. Germany, for example, buys 15% of all blood exports. China and Japan are key customers. And I'm pretty sure, that all the conspiracy theories about how the rich love to bathe themselves in the blood of the innocent to stay young. Oh, man. Oh, Matthew Phillips.
That Mint Press article was surprisingly detailed and long. Like, yeah. I started reading it thinking, okay, this is fun, this is interesting, and then I started getting into it. Whoa, this is scary, and then it just got scarier and scarier.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
It is horrifying, man. The plasma, a golden liquid that transports proteins and red and blood white cells around the body. It's the plasma that makes it so sought after. All of this is from the article. Donated blood is crucial in treating medical conditions such as anemia and cancer, and is commonly required to perform surgeries. So pregnant women need it. People need blood, and that's cool. But in order to generate such enormous profits, these vampiric corporations consciously target the poorest and most desperate Americans. Man.
I've got a couple quotes for you.
Go for it.
Not a lot of people realize this, but Capital by Marx is, I would say, like half history, half economics, a lot of literary flourishes. So here's a couple literary flourishes. Mm-hmm. Capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. And then another one, if money comes into the world with a congenital blood stain on one cheek, capital comes dripping from head to toe, from every pore with blood and dirt.
Oh, man. Well played, Matthew Phillips. Well played. And to tie into that, almost half of America is broke. 58% of the country is living check to check with savings of less than $1,000. 37 million Americans go to bed hungry, including 1/6 of New Yorkers, almost half of the South Bronx. And over 500,000 sleep on the streets at any given night. The majority of donors in Cleveland generate more than a third of their income from donating blood.
Oh, that was, I remember that one. That one struck me.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So now you're working your 2-3 jobs. And then to fill in the gaps, you go and you give blood. And I don't know how much blood you gave when you do the blood drive, but they always tell you, okay, now's not the time to go on binge drinking rage, You got to go, you got to rest, you got to relax. So all these people, they're donating all this blood. They're already working a shit ton of jobs. And back to the article, 70% of donors experience health complications. Donors have a lower protein count in their blood, putting them at a greater risk of infection, liver and kidney disorders. Many regulars suffer from near permanent fatigue and are borderline anemic. And they get an average of $30 for donating their blood.
Which is pennies, man.
Jesus Christ, man. Yeah. So you're draining the blood of the innocent for a minimum of $30, and then you're selling it to rich people in Europe and the United States for millions of dollars. That's your Marx quote right there, man.
Yeah. That's just incredible. Just incredible.
It's horrible. And then on top of that, many centers are enormous, with multiple rows of dozens of machines working in an attempt to appease the insatiable appetite of the vampiric corporation. And there is, according to Watkins, no lack of human victims willing to be treated like animals in battery farms, the Matrix, in exchange for a few dollars. It was an assembly line to extract liquid gold from human minds. Usually the places are understaffed, people don't change gloves, you're there for 2-3 hours, waiting for these dirty-handed people to take the blood out of you, and then you get $20. Matthew Phillips, we're doomed.
First they can't find the vein, and then they miss, and then they miss again, and then
yeah. And that needle is huge, man. I don't like needles. And that needle, when you're donating blood, you can see the giant hole in it, man, and it freaks me out every time. Oh my God. And then finally on this, the exploitation of humans has reached new levels in clinics on the US-Mexico border. Every week, thousands of Mexicans enter the U.S. on temporary visas to sell their blood to for-profit pharmaceutical corporations. The practice is banned on health grounds in Mexico, but is completely legal north of the border. According to ProPublica, there are at least 43 blood donation centers along the border that prey primarily on Mexican nationals in a legally ambiguous practice.
Oh my God, dude! That I mean, talk about ambulance chaser. That is so shady.
It's horrifying.
Fuck.
It's horrifying. According to a Swiss documentary on the subject, they're not checking the blood, Matt. There are precious few checks on the cleanliness of the blood these companies accept, with some donors interviewed admitting that they were drug addicts. Rachel from Wisconsin admitted, "I did it for the money. I think we all do it for the money." But it's not really something you out and out say because there's a veneer of quote unquote helping the sick slathered over it. But I caught glimpses of what kind of industry it was on occasion through innocuous questioning. The amount of plasma drawn from one person per donation is worth upwards of $600, and they're paying $30 to these people. And then they're not clearly checking the blood to find out,
That's what I'm saying. Pennies,
Yeah. So, I mean, there it is, man. And then they basically wrap up the article with that ad I was talking about. Need books? No worries. Donate plasma. New donors earn up to $100 in a week. Paying for college expenses on your own is tough. You can earn money while helping to create life-saving treatments by donating plasma.
You've missed your true vocation.
I spent $80,000 on this, and here I am doing a podcast with you for nothing. So life is good, baby. Circle of life.
You would do well for an advertising agency.
Thank you, Matthew Phillips. But I read stories like this, and there's just no hope, man. People who want to say, free college, we can't afford that. And so people are you have to have a college degree at this point to get a good job.
Yeah, it
Unless,
helps. It helps.
and so here you are, you want to improve your life, you know, and it's the type of society that if you're a stripper, well, oh, you're a whore. You're a whore. You slept your way through college. And then, the sugardaddies.com. And then the people who don't do that, hey, I don't have money. Let me just give all of my blood so I can get a B in social studies. Another story that caught my eye, Matthew Phillips, is China. Well, China is not a story. China is a country, but China says that they could replace 20 million computers in 3 years as Beijing pushes to wean itself off of foreign tech. And that's a little worrisome to me, man. The Chinese government is taking further steps to remove foreign technology from state agencies and other organizations, a clear sign of determination for more independence amid escalating tensions with the US. Trade war, very bad. China. Beijing will likely replace as many as 20 million computers at government agencies with domestic products over the next 3 years, according to research from China Securities. More than 100 trial projects for domestic products were completed in July, the brokerage firm said. The Financial Times newspaper said the Communist Party's central office earlier this year ordered state offices and public institutions to shift away from foreign hardware and software. Matthew Phillips, I'm sure here in Korea you've run into, while you're teaching your classes, students will give you homework in that HWP, Hangul word processor format.
Right.
So it's not like, their countries have not tried to replace the stranglehold that Microsoft and Windows has, but this is a little something different.
Of course, because China has the wherewithal to shift the consumer habits or consuming habits of a billion consumers.
A billion people. Yeah.
Whereas Korea is just 50 million.
Right. So it's not the same as Hangul word processor being on every computer in Korea.
Completely different.
Yeah, this would be a massive hit in the pockets of Apple and Microsoft.
I love it. The various monopolies that rule America and the world right now, they've deserved some competition for years and haven't gotten any, really.
It's 100%. And ironically, the big business push in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to move all production of everything to China is going to come and bite them in the ass now.
Well, I mean, this was a choice made over decades by both parties very willingly.
Yes, absolutely.
And so anybody who didn't see this coming a good 20 years ago or more is fucking out to lunch.
Yeah, 100%. The computers are designed in America. The Apple computers love to say that, designed in America, but they're built in China.
You want to hear some facts about China?
Go for it.
Okay. So, I was listening to David Harvey this morning earlier, and he was comparing China's role in the economy in 2019 or around that area to the United States in 1945. After the World War, the United States propped up Western Europe and, was the engine behind which, the global economy hummed for a good, 30, almost 40 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once the early 70s hit, the American economy sort of hit a pothole and it's never really recovered. And that's mainly because of this offshoring that you were talking about, right. The titans of industry said to themselves, labor has too much power. What are we going to do? Well, if we move all our labor to China, then they won't have power, will they?
Right.
So, the global juggernaut that is America starts to slow down in the 70s, but the titans of industry, they keep their stranglehold sort of for 3 or 4 decades. But you know who basically got us out of the 2007-2008 crash?
Who's that?
China.
Explain, Matthew Phillips.
Well, they were not involved in a lot of the shady housing deals that the Anglosphere was.
Right. The credit default swaps and chopping up the loans to tranches. Right.
Yeah. So American businesses were basically paralyzed at this time, whereas a lot of other nations like Latin America and China, they were not necessarily immediately influenced by this crash, right? They could have been, the TARP in a way helped things. Without that, things would have gone differently. And you can argue for it or against it, but that's not what's important. What's important is in 2009, 2007, 2008. Let's see, what does it say here? Yeah, you know how many miles of high-speed rail China had?
How many?
About 0. You know how many they have now?
All.
Yeah, basically, they have 20,000 miles now.
Jesus.
So they built that in about 10 years.
And meanwhile, you have people. Meanwhile, anytime you talk about that in America, people, well, how can we do that? It's impossible.
State capitalism, baby.
We don't have the money.
So here's another couple facts. So from 2000 to 2011, if you look at global cement consumption,
yes,
China basically in those 2 or 3 years consumed as much cement as America did in the previous 100.
What the? Wow. I have had that conversation with people before about, how Amtrak is being starved by Republicans and Democrats because, they can't wait to privatize every last fucking thing. And America's too big to build a railroad that goes from one end of the country to the other. And I'm like, what? We went to the fucking moon, dude. How are you not seeing the high-speed trains in Japan, Europe, and just Asia in general, and not just being like, why the fuck am I taking Acela and thinking that this is great? And all that concrete, wow, that's amazing.
So, yeah, it's really, in certain respects, if China wants to call themselves socialist, that's fine. But they do really resemble a little bit more something that might be called state capitalism. The state decides, look, these are the big ticket items that we're concerned about. But then the way that they've been going about it is pretty novel. Is they'll just call up all these local municipalities and they'll say, get it done, and call us in a week or two, and if you haven't made any progress, we're going to start jumping on your ass a little bit, and if a couple months happen or pass and you haven't gotten shit done, we're going to replace you.
We're going to eradicate your town.
Yeah, we're going to nuke you.
Oh my God, that is amazing. 100 years worth of concrete in how long?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years or so.
There it is right there, man. When people like Bernie Sanders say things, that we need to go into a World War II style of
mentality
to combat climate change, people will tell you that's impossible. We can't do it. Meanwhile, at a time when there were no computers, Social Security cards were given out to every United States citizen. At a time when there were no computers, everything was on goddamn vacuum tubes. The United States economy went from being consumerist to total war footing on every level. advertising, manufacturing, hey kids, go collect as many cans as you can, and now use it to buy war bonds. All right, ladies, it's time for you to turn in your stockings to help Joe over there make parachutes. I mean, every level was about changing the mentality of people and business so they could contribute 100% effort to blowing shit up. And you tell people, hey, let's try the same thing for climate change. It doesn't exist, LOL.
By the way, that was a really good white guy's voice.
Yo, we grew up on Looney Tunes, man. And those we grew up on Looney Tunes, and we're definitely the last generation to grow up on newsreel footage. And that's how those people used to talk. Item! Joe has finally made it back to Korea.
Oh my God. Dude, I wish I could bottle that. That's fucking amazing.
Oh man, I love those things. America's on the march today. That type of shit.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, so the Chinese basically, the Chinese government anyway, it just seems like they're doing what we were saying that the oil and gas industry should have been doing. Plan for the fucking future.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, like, I don't want to make the Chinese government sound too sexy or anything, but
no, not at all.
On the other hand, like, they've been doing this civilization thing for about 5,000 years. They're not fucking stupid, and the problem I have is a lot of media that you'll see, if it's regular corporate media, they just say the stupidest shit about China,
Yeah. I'm not saying that the Chinese government, is raindrops and lollipops.
Yeah.
And raindrops.
Yeah. But, neither am I.
But I mean, hey, here's an idea. The United States has been a dick to us for decades, particularly with this Trump China trade war tariff, China. So you know what? In 3 years, say that this actually happens. In 3 years, computers in China are no longer Compaq or even fucking Samsung.
Right.
And they're not using Microsoft or Apple anymore. Because their phones already, they have the Huawei, did I pronounce that right? They have their own phone companies. So in theory, as much as people say, America should go back to isolationism, we can do everything ourselves, China could literally just say, we're going to make our own phones, our own computers, our own TVs, our own cars. We've been doing it. You moved all the manufacturing over here. We know what time it is. We've done a little bit of corporate espionage, quite frankly, so we got the plans.
Oh, and also, if China and Russia wanted to sink America in 2000 and 2008, they could have. They could have just called in all the
debts,
the bonds. Yeah,
the bonds. Yeah, it is absolutely possible for China to just say, we can make our own computer programs and hardware. Thanks, we're good. Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Microsoft. We're good. I mean, look at how Hollywood has changed in the last 10 years. They bend over backwards to let certain movies be edited for quote unquote Chinese off audiences.
I see. Yeah, that's definitely a pattern, like with all industry almost, pretty much.
Yeah, because the money's got to come from somewhere.
Yep. Too many customers in China to alienate them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a knock on China. Their middle class is massive.
Yeah.
Their middle class is bigger than the population of the United States.
And that happened almost overnight, within about 20 years.
Right. This article, this is not a knock on China.
Yeah.
This is not a knock on China. This is a warning. You want to talk all of this shit about how America's number one and stuff like that. You're going to piss off China. And if China decides we're going to make our own hardware and software, shut out the computer market and the cell phone market, yeah, sure. You can sell to the other countries in the world, but you just lost out on $1.5 billion.
China.
China.
Overtime. Yeah, there was the Washington Post article, which is, it feels like it's about 10 years too late or so.
Definitely.
But nonetheless, it's a good article, and if you haven't gone through it yet, you definitely should. It's a good and bad thing. Well, it's not really a bad thing. It's a good thing, but what's a little bit annoying is it seems like there's a big yawn in response, like nobody's really responding. Like I haven't seen anybody post this article. I haven't seen anybody talk about it.
Right.
A few people on Twitter. That's about it. That's incredibly disheartening. Like even though a lot of this is probably things that most Americans suspected was true.
Yeah.
Like I really wish that my supposedly liberal friends would take this opportunity and be like, okay, how about let's prosecute these war criminals? How about that?
That's right, man. The article that I got was from GQ, and
Cool.
the GQ report breaks down the Washington Post report because sometimes the Washington Post hits you with a paywall.
Yeah.
So Luke Darby, December 9th, he writes, the war in Afghanistan is officially the longest armed conflict in U.S. history. 18 years into it, there's still no clear end in sight. All this despite the fact that officials, including former President George W. Bush, insisted that victory was constantly around the corner, even if troop withdrawal seemed unlikely. So the Washington Post began releasing documents that reporters obtained through the Freedom of Information Act after a 3-year legal battle. 2,000 pages of confidential, previously unpublished notes of interviews by the federal government with people who had a direct role in the war, including diplomats, aid workers, Afghan officials, U.S. generals. TLDR, for those people who say that, this war was bullshit. They knew it was bullshit the entire time.
And I did a little bit of digging too. I wanted to refresh my memory about the beginnings of this war.
Yeah, same.
It's that is really disturbing. There's basically no reason that we should have gone there in the first place.
That's right.
They were offering up the various Al-Qaeda people, and Bush was like, no, not interested.
Yes, that's right. I do remember that there were reports that the Taliban said, look, we'll give you this dude. Do not invade the country. And
at first they were putting some conditions on it. They were saying, well, if you give us some proof that it was bin Laden who was involved, then we'll hand him over. But then, a couple months pass and they don't give any conditions. They'll just be like, okay, who do you need? Look, we're going to give him to you.
Mm-hmm. I do remember that.
And lastly, on this one point for me on my end is the UN did not officially sign on to this. So that is, in my mind, I mean, that's the nail in the coffin. That makes this war illegal.
Well, there is that. There's also the AUMF, the authorization of military force. It's not actually a declaration of war. Congress is supposed to be able to declare war, not the president. Also, there has to be a stated goal, an ending. Okay, they got bin Laden. They blew the shit out of Iraq and Afghanistan. They never left. Rumsfeld, straight up, November 15th, 2002. The idea that it's going to be a long battle of some kind, I think is belied by the fact of what happened in 1990. 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months, but it certainly isn't going to last any longer than that. It won't be a World War III. That's straight out of the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld's mouth.
Right, because most people at the time, even, your average 30 or 40-year-old, I was about 30 at the time, homeowning, average Joe, if you would have asked them, hey, is this a good idea? They probably would have said, well, how long are we going to be there? And if you said, well, maybe 5 or 10 years, they would have said, hell no, it's a stupid idea. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
So that's why we get Rumsfeld with this lie, because he knew he couldn't sell a long war.
That's right, man. That's right. There were the experts who were saying the war will pay for itself. The war will pay for itself. There's from The Nation, Unwise words from the experts who promised a cost-free war. The following quotes were compiled by Christopher Cerf and Victor Navasky in their capacity as CEO, president of the Institute of Expertology, which has just issued a report on the experts who were wrong about Iraq before, during, and after the war. All right?
The New York Times, one of them I'll give you. New York Times said this will not destabilize the Middle East.
Iraq is a very wealthy country, enormous oil reserves. They can largely finance the reconstruction of their own country, and I have no doubt they will. Richard Pearl, July 11th, 2002, chair of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. The cost of any intervention would be very small. Glenn Hubbard, White House Economic Advisor, October 4th, 2002. Ari Fleischer, scumbag. Iraq has tremendous resources that belong to the Iraqi people, and so there are a variety of means that Iraq has to be able to shoulder much of the burden for their own reconstruction. Oh my God. Like, these are supposed to be qualified people. Paul Wolfowitz. There's a lot of money to pay for this that doesn't have to be U.S. taxpayer money. And it starts with the assets of the Iraqi people. We're talking about a country that can really finance its own reconstruction, and relatively soon. And how many trillion is it now?
Yeah, well, I mean, the accounting is difficult to do, but a lot of reports I've seen are, when you count the interest and the debt and that kind of thing, about 6 trillion.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and that's when you realize this, well, how are we going to pay for it sort of idea is such bullshit. Nobody asked that when we got into this shit.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, you bastards.